In a private clinic on the 22nd floor of a glass tower in Seoul, a young woman lay on a bed with one hand resting on her stomach. She was 28 years old. Her name was Adwoa Mensah. She was Ghanaian American, born in Accra, raised in Atlanta, and now living in South Korea as a senior cardiology fellow at one of the city's most respected heart hospitals. She was also 4 months pregnant with twins. Adwoa had come to Seoul 3 years earlier on a research fellowship. She had planned to stay for 1 year. She had stayed because she met a man at a charity gala who did not speak much, did not smile easily, and did not look away when she explained her work. His name was Han Do-jin. He was 34. He wore a black suit that fit him like skin. The room treated him with the kind of careful silence that told her exactly what kind of man he was before anyone said a word. He was the head of the Han family. The Han family ran the Eastern Docks, 3 private banks, and a long list of things people did not write down on paper. Adwoa knew what he was. She did not pretend otherwise. She told him on their second meeting that she would not lie for him, would not hide for him, and would not stop her work for him. He had listened to all of it without interrupting. Then he had said one sentence. "I do not need you to be smaller. I need you to stay." She stayed. They married 11 months later in a small ceremony with no press and no photographs. Her mother flew in from Atlanta and cried through the entire service. Do-jin's mother, a thin woman with sharp eyes, did not cry. She watched Adwoa walk down the aisle the way a banker watches a contract she has not yet signed. For the first year of the marriage, Adwoa was happy in a quiet, careful way. Do-jin was not a soft man, but he was a steady one. He came home most nights. He learned to cook one Ghanaian dish, jollof rice, and he made it badly every Sunday until she laughed so hard she cried. He left the hospital alone. He never asked her to leave her work. Then, in the second year, a woman walked back into his life. Her name was Seo Mirai. She was 26. She was the only daughter of a senator who had protected the Han family's business for 2 decades. Mirai had grown up calling Do-jin Appa. She had assumed, since she was 16, that she would one day be his wife. No one had ever told her otherwise, because no one had thought it needed saying. When Do-jin married a black foreign doctor in a private ceremony with no announcement, Mirai did not cry. She did not scream. She simply changed her schedule so that she would be at every event Do-jin attended. She wore white to the wedding reception held 1 month later for the business partners. She stood near the door and smiled at Adwoa as if they were old friends. "You must be tired," Mirai said, holding Adwoa's hand a moment too long. "Korea is hard on women who are not from here. If you ever need anything, you must call me. I have known him since I was a child. I know what he likes." Adwoa thanked her politely. She did not let go of Do-jin's arm for the rest of the night. She told Do-jin on the drive home what Mirai had said. He listened. He did not answer for a long time. Then he said, "She is the senator's daughter. I cannot send her away without breaking something I cannot afford to break right now." Adwoa understood. She did not like it, but she understood. That was her first mistake. A year passed. Adwoa worked. Do-jin worked. Mirai appeared at dinners, at hospital fundraisers, at the gym Adwoa used, at the coffee shop near the hospital, always smiling, always polite, always too close. When Adwoa told Do-jin she was pregnant, she told him in their kitchen at 6 in the morning, holding 2 tests in her hand. He sat down slowly on the floor. He did not speak for almost a full minute. Then he pressed his face against her stomach and said, in a voice she had never heard from him before, "Thank you." It was twins. The doctor confirmed it at the 10-week scan. 2 heartbeats, strong and even, side by side. Dojin became a different man overnight. He came home every evening. He canceled 3 business trips. He bought books on pregnancy and read them at his desk between meetings. He told his men, in a single short sentence, that any threat to his wife would be treated as a threat to him personally. Mireille heard about the pregnancy 2 days after Adwoa did. She heard it from one of the household staff she had been quietly paying for 6 months. That night, Mireille sat alone in her apartment and made a decision. She decided that the twins would not be born. She did not decide it in anger. She decided it the way a businesswoman decides to remove a competitor from the market, calmly, with a plan. She began with the kitchen. The Han household had 3 cooks. The youngest, a girl of 22 named Yuna, had a brother in prison for a drug charge. Mireille's father, the senator, could make that charge disappear. Mireille did not need to threaten the girl. She only had to offer. Yuna agreed within a week. The next part was the hardest. Mira needed a substance that would not be detected on a standard blood panel, would cross the placental barrier, and would act slowly enough that no single meal could be traced. She found a pharmacist in Incheon who owed a debt to one of her father's old friends. He prepared a small bottle of clear liquid, tasteless, odorless. He told her it was a heavy metal compound used in industrial cleaning, modified for slow release. He told her 3 drops a day, for 6 weeks, would do what she wanted. He also told her, looking at the floor, that he would not say what it could do to the babies if the mother somehow survived. Mireille paid him in cash and did not ask. The poison started in the 5th month of Adwoa's pregnancy. It went into her morning porridge. It went into her afternoon tea. It went into the soup Yuna prepared every night before going home. Adwoa, who had been raised to finish what was put on her plate, ate it all. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then the headaches began. Adwoa told herself it was the pregnancy. She had read that headaches were common in the 2nd trimester. She drank more water. She rested more. She did not tell Dojin because she did not want to worry him. That was her 2nd mistake. By the end of the 3rd week, her hands had begun to shake. By the 4th, she could not finish a sentence without losing the thread. By the 5th, she fainted in the hospital cafeteria and woke up in one of her own emergency department beds, with a colleague holding her wrist and frowning. The blood panel showed nothing unusual. Her iron was low. Her sugar was a little off. Everything else looked normal. The colleague, a small, careful man named Dr. Pak, did not believe the panel. He ordered a 2nd one. He ordered a 3rd. He ordered a heavy metal screen, which was not routine, because something in the way Adwoa's pupils responded to light reminded him of a case he had read about in medical school. The results came back on a Friday afternoon. Dr. Pak read them twice. Then, he called Adwoa into his office and closed the door. "Adwoa," he said, "someone is poisoning you." She did not speak. She put both hands on her stomach. "How long?" she finally asked. 5 weeks at least, maybe 6. The levels are extremely high. I do not understand how you are still walking. The babies." Dr. Pak looked at the floor. Then he looked at her. "I do not know," he said. I have never seen a case at this stage. I do not know what it has done to them. I do not know what it will do." Adwoa sat very still. Then she stood up, took her bag, and walked out of the office. She did not cry. She did not call Dojin. She drove herself home, walked into the kitchen, and looked at Yuna, who was stirring the evening soup. Yuna saw her face and dropped the spoon. "Who paid you?" Adwoa said. Not a question, a statement. Yuna fell to her knees on the kitchen floor and told her everything in less than 3 minutes. Adwoa did not call the police. She did not call her husband. She called one person, a woman she had gone to medical school with in Atlanta, a forensic toxicologist now working in Singapore. She sent her the lab results. She asked one question. "Can the twins survive this?" The reply came 4 hours later. "Adwoa, I'm so sorry. The compound is neurotoxic and it crosses the placenta. At these levels, the most likely outcome is fetal demise within 2 weeks. If by some miracle they are still alive, they will be severely damaged. I have to be honest with you. There is no realistic path where these babies are born healthy. I am sorry. I love you. Call me when you can." Adwoa read the message 3 times. Then she walked into Dojin's study, where he was on a call, and she stood in front of his desk until he ended it. She told him everything: the headaches, the blood panel, the poison, Yuna, Mireille. He did not move for a long time. His hands rested flat on the desk. His face did not change. Then he said very quietly, "Are you sure it was Mireille?" And in that moment, in that one careful, lawyer-like question, Adwoa understood something she had refused to understand for 2 years. He had known. Not about the poison. He had not known about the poison, but about Mireille's obsession, about the small payments she had been making to the household staff, about the way she had been moving through their lives like water finding cracks. He had known. His men had told him months ago. He had decided to handle it slowly, politically, in a way that would not damage his alliance with her father. He had decided his alliance was worth the risk to her. Adwoa saw all of this on his face in the half second before he tried to hide it. She walked out of the study. She walked out of the house. She got into her car and she drove until she could not see the road through her tears. And then she pulled over on the side of a highway outside Seoul. And she sat in the driver's seat with both hands on her stomach. And she spoke to her babies for the first time, as if they were already gone. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I did not know. I did not know." She drove to her hospital. She admitted herself. She started chelation therapy that same night, the treatment to pull heavy metals out of the body, knowing that the treatment itself was dangerous to a pregnancy this advanced. She did not contact Dojin. He called her phone 14 times that night. She did not answer. On the 3rd day in the hospital, while she was sleeping after a long round of treatment, her body began to shut down. Her blood pressure dropped. Her heart slowed. The monitors began to scream. Dr. Pak ran into the room. 3 other doctors ran in behind him. They worked on her for 40 minutes. They saved her life. Then they checked the twins. The ultrasound technician was a woman in her 50s who had been doing this work for 30 years. She moved the wand across Adwoa's stomach for a long time. She moved it again. She called for a second machine. She called for the senior fetal medicine specialist. The specialist arrived. He looked at the screen. He looked at it again. "They are alive," he said, "both of them, but He stopped. He did not have a word for what he was seeing. The twins were alive. Their hearts were beating, but they were not moving. They were not responding to sound. Their brain activity, when finally measured days later through a specialized scan, was minimal, present, but reduced to a level so low that the specialist used a phrase Adwoa had never heard applied to a fetus in her entire medical career. "It is, in effect, a coma," he said. "They are in a coma in the womb." He paused. "I have never seen this. I do not know how long it will last. I do not know if they will ever wake." Adwoa, lying in the hospital bed with her husband nowhere in the building, asked the only question she could ask. "If I carry them, will they live?" The specialist took a long breath. "I do not know. Their bodies are growing, slowly, but they are growing. If you choose to continue the pregnancy, we will support you. But Mrs. Hahn, I have to tell you, I do not think they will ever wake up. Even if they are born, they will likely never wake up. You should know that before you decide." Adwoa closed her eyes. She said, "I am keeping them." Adwoa Mensah did not go back to her husband's house. The next morning, she signed the papers to admit herself into the hospital's long-stay maternal ward. She gave power of attorney over her treatment to Dr. Pak. She instructed the hospital, in writing, that her husband was not to be allowed in her room without her written permission. She did not file for divorce. Not yet. There was no energy in her body for that fight. There were only 2 small heartbeats, and a body that needed to keep them alive. Dojin came to the hospital on the second day. He was stopped at the ward door by 2 of the hospital's security guards and Dr. Pak. He did not push past them. He did not raise his voice. He stood in the hallway in a black coat for almost an hour, looking at the closed door. Then he turned and left. He came back the next day and the next. For 31 days, he came every morning at 7 and stood in the hallway for 1 hour. He never asked to be let in. He never spoke to the staff except to say good morning. On the 32nd day, Adwoa sent Dr. Pak out with a single piece of paper. The paper said, "Find out who paid the pharmacist. Find out who paid Yuna. Find out everyone who knew. I will not see you until you can give me names." Dojin read it. He folded it. He put it in his coat pocket. He nodded once. He left. He did not come back for 96 days. In those 96 days, several things happened that Adwoa did not see. The first thing was that Yuna, the young cook, disappeared from Seoul. She did not disappear in the bad way Adwoa feared. She disappeared because Dojin's people moved her to a small apartment in Daegu, paid for her brother's lawyer, and told her she would be needed as a witness one day. She was not to leave the country. She was to wait. The second thing was that Mireille was not killed. Dojin had wanted to. He had sat in his office on the night Adwoa walked out, and he had taken a gun out of his desk, and he had held it on his lap for 40 minutes. Then he had put it back, because his wife had asked him for names, not bodies. And because, for the first time in his life, he understood that his wife was not asking him to be the man he had always been. She was asking him to be a different man, a smaller man, a slower man, the kind of man who could be trusted in a room with 2 damaged babies. He put the gun away. He picked up a phone instead. He called a prosecutor he had never bribed. He called a journalist whose father he had once protected, but whose career he had never tried to control. He called an old friend in the National Forensic Service. He gave them everything: the toxicology report, the kitchen staff, the pharmacist in Incheon, the bank records of the small payments Mireille had made over 6 months. He gave them his name as a witness, not as a victim, as a witness. The senator, Mireille's father, called him 3 times that week and threatened him in language that would have started a war 10 years ago. Do-jin listened. Then he said, in a voice the senator had never heard from him, "Sir, my wife is in a hospital because of your daughter. I am giving you the only mercy I have left in me. I am letting the law take her. Do not call me again." The senator did not call again. Mia Roy was arrested on a Tuesday morning at her apartment in Gangnam. The arrest was filmed by 3 different news channels because the journalist Do-jin had made sure it would be. The story ran for 2 weeks. The pharmacist confessed. Yuna gave a sworn statement. The bank records did the rest. Mireille's trial was set for the following spring. She was held without bail because her father's political enemies, and there were many, moved against him at the same time, and his protection collapsed in a single month. Do-jin watched all of this happen from his office. He did not celebrate. He did not feel relief. He felt only a low, tired weight that he understood he would carry for the rest of his life. He also did one more thing in those 96 days. He went alone to a small temple outside Seoul. He sat on the cold floor of the prayer hall for 3 hours. He did not pray. He simply made a list in his mind of every time in the last 3 years his wife had asked him for something, and he had said yes too slowly, or no too quickly, or nothing at all. The list was long. He stayed until he had finished it. Then he went back to Seoul to begin the slow work of becoming a man who would not need to make that list again. On the 96th day, he asked Dr. Pak if he could see his wife. Dr. Pak passed the message. Adwoa read it. She read the news articles Dr. Pak brought her. She read the prosecutor's filing. She read Yuna's statement. She said, "He may visit once a week, 1 hour. He will not touch me. He will not speak unless I speak first." Do-jin began visiting on Sundays. He sat in a chair on the far side of the room. He did not bring flowers. He did not bring gifts. He brought a book, sometimes a medical journal she'd once mentioned, sometimes a novel in English, and he read it quietly while she rested. When the hour was over, he stood, bowed, and left. For 6 months he came every Sunday. He never missed one. He read 43 books. Some Sundays she slept the entire hour. Some Sundays she asked him one question about the business, about his mother, about a piece of news, and he answered carefully and waited to see if she had another. Some Sundays she watched him read and said nothing at all, and he could feel her eyes measuring him, the way a person measures a piece of furniture to see if it will fit in a room they are slowly building. He did not flinch. He had earned it. He let her look. Adwoa carried the twins. It should not have been possible. Every 2 weeks, the specialist looked at the scans and shook his head and said, "I do not understand. They are still growing. Their bodies developed. Their organs formed. Their hearts beat steady and slow. But their brains showed the same low, flat activity. They did not move. They did not respond. They slept the deep, strange sleep that no one in the field had ever seen continue this long." At 38 weeks, full term, the specialist sat down with Adwoa and asked the question he had been afraid to ask. "If we deliver them now, they will not wake. They will need machines. They will need a feeding tube, they may live, but they will live as they are now. If we wait, your body will not be able to sustain them much longer. You have to decide. Adwoa thought for a long time. Then she said, "We do not deliver them." The specialist stared at her. "I do not understand. My body is sustaining them. My placenta is feeding them. My blood is keeping them warm. If I deliver them, they will be on machines that cannot do for them what my body is doing. I am a cardiologist. I know what those machines can and cannot do. I want to keep them inside until they wake up, or until my body cannot do it anymore." Mrs. Hahn, there's no medical literature for this. Pregnancies do not continue past 42 weeks safely. My body has done things in the last 6 months that no medical literature has described. I am asking you to monitor them, to monitor me, and to wait. The specialist did not agree easily. He brought in 3 colleagues. They argued. They wrote papers among themselves. They monitored Adwoa hour by hour. Her body, against everything they knew, held. The pregnancy continued. 40 weeks. 42, 45, 50. The hospital staff began to call her, very quietly among themselves, the miracle. Then they stopped, because they were afraid of jinxing it. At the 60-week mark, a quiet professor from Tokyo flew in to consult. He examined the scans. He said in halting English, "The fetuses are in a state of metabolic suspension. The body has slowed them. It is protecting them. I have read of this in animals. I have not seen it in humans. Do not deliver. Wait. The body knows." Adwoa waited. Dojin came every Sunday. He read his books. He learned, slowly, to be the kind of man who could sit in a room and not need to control it. On the 105th Sunday, which was by the calendar, 2 full years after the night Adwoa had driven herself to the hospital, something changed. It was a quiet afternoon. Dojin was reading. Adwoa was half asleep. The monitor beside the bed, which had been making the same soft beat for 2 years, suddenly skipped. It skipped once, then twice, then a third time, faster. Adwoa opened her eyes. She put her hand on her stomach. Something moved under her palm. For the first time in over 600 days, something moved. Dojin put the book down. He stood up. He did not come closer. "Adwoa," he said. The first word he had spoken in her presence in months. She was crying. She did not even know when she'd started. "Get the doctor," she said. "Get the doctor now." The babies were waking up. It took 6 days for the twins to come fully out of whatever state their small bodies had been in. The doctors monitored them around the clock. The scans changed. The flat brain waves rose slowly, then more steadily, until by the 5th day they looked, the specialist said with tears in his eyes, like the brain waves of any other baby at term. I have no explanation at all. Adwoa went into labor on the 7th day. It was a long, difficult labor. Her body had been pregnant for so long that the muscles had to be coaxed into remembering what to do. The specialist performed a careful C-section in the end. The first twin was a girl. She came out crying, loud, healthy, angry crying. She weighed 6 pounds, 2 ounces. The second twin was a boy. He came out quiet, looked at the lights, blinked twice, and then began to cry as well. He weighed 6 pounds, 8 ounces. Both babies, against every prediction, against every piece of medical evidence anyone had ever recorded, were healthy. Their organs worked. Their reflexes were normal. Their hearing was perfect. Their eyes tracked the lights. Their fingers gripped the doctor's gloved hand. The neonatologist, a woman who had been in the field for 40 years, sat down on the floor of the operating room and cried quietly for 10 minutes. Adwoa held them both, one in each arm, and did not speak for a long time. She just looked at them. Then she looked up. Dojin was at the door of the operating room where the doctors had finally let him stand. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Come and meet your children." He walked across the room slowly, as if he was afraid the floor would not hold him. He knelt beside the bed. He looked at the babies. He looked at his wife. He did not try to touch them. "May I?" he asked. Adwoa nodded. He put one finger, very carefully, against the girl's small hand. The girl, sleeping now, closed her fingers around it. Dojin's face broke. He did not sob. He did not make a sound. But for the first time in his adult life, Han Dojin, head of the Han family, the most feared man in Eastern Seoul, sat on the floor beside his wife's hospital bed and cried like a man who had been given back something he had been certain he had lost forever. Adwoa watched him cry. She did not comfort him, but she did not look away. That was the beginning. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was the beginning of the road that might one day lead there. They named the girl Essie, after Adwoa's grandmother in Ghana. They named the boy Han Minjai, after Dojin's grandfather, who had been a fisherman and not a criminal. Adwoa stayed in the hospital for 1 more month. The doctors wanted to observe the twins. The twins continued to be, in every measurable way, normal, healthy infants. They ate, they cried, they slept. They grabbed at fingers and at the hair of any nurse who leaned too close. They were, in every visible way, 2 perfectly ordinary newborns, except that they had been carried inside their mother for over 60 weeks, and except that by every law of medicine they should not have existed at all. The medical journals would write about them for the next 20 years. Adwoa refused every interview. She said simply, "They are my children. They are not a case study." When she left the hospital, she did not go to the Han house. She rented a small apartment in Mappo, 3 rooms on the 4th floor of a quiet building. She moved in with the babies and a nurse she had hired from her own savings. Dojin did not ask her to come home. He did not push. He understood finally that this would be on her terms, or it would not happen at all. He visited the apartment 3 times a week, always with permission. Always, at times, Adwoa chose. He brought groceries. He brought diapers. He brought a small wooden rocking horse that he had spent 4 hours assembling himself badly, with 3 pieces left over. Adwoa laughed at the rocking horse. It was the first time he had heard her laugh in over 2 years. He went home that night and sat in his empty house and wept again. The trial of Seo Mireille began 3 months after the twins were born. Adwoa testified. She wore a gray dress and she did not look at Mireille once during her testimony. She described, in clear, simple medical language, what the poison had done to her body, what it had done to her babies, and what the 2-year coma in the womb had cost, financially, physically, and in every other way that could not be measured. Yuna testified. The pharmacist testified. The bank manager testified. Du Jin testified as a witness against the woman his own family's politics had once required him to tolerate. Mireille's lawyer was the most expensive in Seoul. He argued that Mireille had been mentally unwell, that the pharmacist had misled her about the substance, that she had not intended murder. The court did not believe him. Mireille was convicted of attempted murder, conspiracy, and assault on a pregnant woman. The judge, an older woman with a quiet voice, read the sentence on a cold Thursday morning. 28 years. No parole eligibility for the first 20. Mira did not cry when she heard the sentence. She turned and looked at Do-jin for the first time in the entire trial. He met her eyes. He did not nod. He did not smile. He simply looked back at her until she was led from the courtroom. The senator, her father, resigned his seat the following week. 3 older corruption cases, long buried, surfaced against him. He was indicted within the month. His political career ended without ever recovering. Do-jin, in the same month, began the slow work of stepping back from the family business. He did not exit completely. He could not. There were too many people whose lives depended on the structure he had built, and he had learned by now that walking away from responsibility was not the same as becoming a better man. But he handed the operational side to his cousin, kept only the legitimate banks and the shipping company under his direct control, and stopped attending meetings that involved decisions he did not want his children to one day read about in the news. He told Adwoa about each change after he made it. He did not ask her permission. He did not ask her approval. He simply told her, the way a man tells his partner what he is doing with his life, and then he waited to see if she would say anything. Most weeks, she did not say anything. She listened. She nodded. She returned to the babies. One Sunday, in the 7th month after the twins were born, Do-jin came to the apartment with a bag of groceries and a small folder under his arm. He set the groceries down. He sat at the small kitchen table. He waited until Adwoa had finished feeding Essie and had laid her down for her nap. Then he opened the folder. Inside were divorce papers, already signed by him, with a settlement larger than anything Adwoa had ever asked for. "You said once that I trapped you in this life," he said quietly. "I want you to know that you are not trapped. If you want this, if you want to be free of me, free of my name, free of all of it, sign these. The settlement is yours. The custody is yours. I will see the children only when you allow it. I will not contest anything." He pushed the folder across the table. "I am not asking you to forgive me. I am asking you to choose. Whatever you choose, I will accept." Adwoa looked at the folder for a long time. She did not open it. She did not pick it up. Then she pushed it back across the table. "Not yet," she said. Do-jin looked at her. "That is not yes," she said. "That is not no. That is not yet. I do not know what I will choose. I may sign these in a year. I may sign them in 5 years. I may never sign them. But I am not making that choice today. And I'm not making it because you handed me a folder. I will make it when I am ready, and not before." Do-jin nodded slowly. He picked up the folder. He put it back under his arm. "Then I will wait," he said, "for as long as it takes." He stood. He went to the bag of groceries. He began, awkwardly, to put them away in her small kitchen, asking her quietly where each thing belonged. Adwoa watched him for a moment from her chair. Then she stood up and went to help him. The twins grew. Essie was loud from the day she was born and never stopped. By the time she was 1, she could throw a ball across the apartment. By the time she was 2, she had learned the word no in 3 languages, Korean, English, and Twi, and used it with great enthusiasm. By the time she was 3, she had decided that she was in charge of her brother and possibly of her father. Minjae was quieter. He watched. He learned things slowly and then never forgot them. By 2, he had figured out how to climb out of his crib. By 3, he had figured out that if he held his father's hand and looked up at him in a certain way, his father would buy him almost anything in the shop. Dojin became, in the slow, incremental way that change actually happens, a different man. He took the children to the park on Saturday mornings. He learned to braid Isi's hair badly at first, then less badly, until one day Adwoa watched him do it from the doorway and realized he had become better at it than she was. He had asked the woman at the African hair shop in Itaewon to teach him, and he had gone back every week for 3 months until she had finally told him, laughing, that he had learned enough, and she did not want to see him again until Essie was old enough to come herself. He cooked, slowly. The jollof rice never improved, but he learned a Ghanaian peanut soup that Essie declared, at the age of 4, was the best thing she had ever eaten. He learned to read children's books in 2 languages. He learned the names of every parent at the preschool and which ones the children played with and which ones they did not. He never moved into the apartment. Adwoa did not invite him to. He did not ask. He had his own apartment now, smaller than his old house, in a building 3 blocks from hers. He had sold the old house. He had given most of the proceeds to a foundation Adwoa had started with the money from the settlement. She had finally, after 18 months, agreed to accept. A foundation that funded medical research into prenatal toxicology and provided free legal support to pregnant women who had been harmed by partners or families. Adwoa returned to her work in stages. First as a consultant, 2 days a week, then 3, then 4. She did not return to surgery. Her hands, after the long months of treatment, were not quite as steady as they had been. But she became one of the country's leading voices on fetal toxicology. And she lectured, and she wrote, and she traveled occasionally, and she came home to her children. And she allowed Dojin to be in their lives, the way she had decided he would be in their lives. They did not remarry. They did not move in together. They built instead this strange, careful structure of 2 people who had been broken by each other and were choosing slowly, day by day, to build something different from what they had broken. On the 5th birthday of the twins, Adwoa held a small party in the apartment. Her mother had flown in from Atlanta. Dr. Pak was there. The Tokyo specialist who had become a friend was there. Yuna was there, Yuna, who had served her 3 years suspended sentence for her role in the poisoning, and had spent the rest of those 3 years on her own initiative, working at a women's shelter in Daegu. Adwoa had forgiven her in the 2nd year, after Yuna had written a letter so honest and so broken that Adwoa had cried for a full afternoon. Yuna now ran the legal support arm of Adwoa's foundation. She was, in her own way, one of Adwoa's closest friends. Dojin was there. He had bought the cake. He had assembled the small bicycle Minjai had been asking for. He had wrapped Isi's gift himself badly, with too much tape. After the candles, after the cake, after the small chaos of 2 5-year-olds opening too many presents at once, after her mother had taken the children into the other room to read them a story, Adwoa stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes. Dojin came in. He picked up a towel. He began to dry the dishes she handed him. They worked in silence for a while. Then Adwoa said, without looking up, "I want you to know something." He waited. I am never going to be the woman I was before all this. That woman is gone. She died in that hospital bed somewhere around the second month. He nodded. He did not speak. And I am never going to forget what happened. I'm not going to wake up one day and pretend that night did not happen, or that the 2 years did not happen, or that what you let into our lives did not happen. He nodded again. But, she said, and she finally looked at him, I have been watching you for 5 years, and I want you to know that I have seen what you have done. I have seen the man you have become. I have seen what it has cost you, and I have seen that you have paid it without complaining and without asking me for anything. She handed him a plate. He dried it. He set it down. I am not asking you to come back, she said. I am not asking you to be my husband again. I do not know if I will ever ask that. I know, he said, but I want you to know that I see you, and I am not angry at you anymore. I have not been angry at you for a long time. I just did not know how to tell you. Dojin set the towel down on the counter. He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were wet, but he did not let himself cry, because the children were in the next room, and he had learned, over 5 years, that there were certain things he was not going to do where they could see. Thank you, he said. Adwa nodded. She handed him another plate. They finished the dishes in silence. That night, after Dojin had gone home, after the children were asleep, after her mother had gone to bed in the spare room, Adwoa stood on the small balcony of her apartment and looked out at the lights of Seoul. She thought about the woman she had been at 28, holding 2 pregnancy tests in a kitchen at 6 in the morning. She thought about the woman she had been at 29, lying in a hospital bed and asking a stranger whether her children could survive. She thought about the woman she had been at 31, watching her babies open their eyes for the first time after 2 years of silence. She thought about the woman she was now. She thought about her children, asleep in the next room, their small hands curled into small fists, their breath slow and steady and alive. She thought about the man 3 blocks away, in his small apartment, who had spent 5 years becoming someone he had never been before. Not because she had demanded it, but because he had finally understood what it cost when he did not. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if, in a year or 5 or 10, she would walk over to that apartment and tell him that she was ready to try again. She did not know if she would sign the divorce papers, eventually, and call it a finished chapter. She did not know if she and Dojin would simply continue for the rest of their lives in this strange, careful structure they had built, raising their children together while living apart, neither married nor not married. She did not need to know. She had her children. She had her work. She had her foundation. She had her mother, who was sleeping down the hall, and Dr. Pak, who had become like a brother, and Yuna, whom she had forgiven, and a Tokyo professor who sent her a Christmas card every year that began with the words, "To the miracle," and her 2 small miracles. She had her life. She had built it herself slowly, out of the broken pieces of the life that had been taken from her. She went inside. She checked on the children. Essie was sleeping with one arm thrown over Minjae's back, the way she had done since they had first been put in the same crib. Minjae was sleeping with his thumb in his mouth, the way he had done since he was old enough to find it. Adwoa stood in the doorway and watched them for a long time. Then she went to her own bed. She lay down. She closed her eyes. She slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a woman who had survived. 10 years after the night Adwoa Mensah drove herself to a hospital with her hands shaking on the wheel, AC Mensah Hyun stood on a small stage at her middle school in Seoul and gave a speech. She was 15. She wore her hair in long braids that her father had helped her finish that morning. She spoke in 3 languages: Korean for the audience, English for her grandmother, who was watching by video from Atlanta, and twin for her mother. The speech was about her name. She had been asked to give a speech about her name and what it meant to her for a school assignment. She talked about her grandmother in Ghana, whom she had never met but whose name she carried. She talked about her father's grandfather, the fisherman, whose name her brother Minjae carried. She talked about how her mother had taught her that names were promises, promises about who you were going to try to be. She did not talk about the poison. She did not talk about the 2-year coma in the womb. She did not talk about the trial or the sentence or any of the other things that had happened before she had been born. She did not know all of those things yet. Her parents had decided, together, that she and her brother would learn the whole story when they were 18, and not before. But at the end of the speech, she did say one thing that she did not entirely understand the weight of. She said, "My mother told me once that I was not born easily. She said that my brother and I had to fight to be here. She said that we slept for a long time before we woke up, and that when we woke up, the world was waiting for us. I do not remember sleeping," she said, "but I remember waking up. I remember the first thing I saw, even though my mother says that is not possible. I remember my mother's face. And I remember, behind her, a man standing in a doorway, crying. That man was my father," she said. "And he is still standing in that doorway, in my memory, every day of my life, watching, waiting, loving us. My name is Essie. It means born on Sunday. I was born on a Sunday. The day I was born," my mother told me later, "was the first Sunday in 2 years that my father did not have to sit in a chair across a room reading a book, hoping I would one day open my eyes and see him. I opened my eyes," she said, "and I am here." In the audience, Adwoa held Dojin's hand for the first time in over a decade. She did not let go for the rest of the speech. She did not let go when the audience stood and clapped. She did not let go when Essie came down from the stage and ran into her arms. She did not let go that night when they walked home together through the spring streets of Seoul. Adwoa and Dojin, Yesi and Minjae, 4 people who had been built slowly and painfully and impossibly out of a story that should have ended in a hospital room on a cold autumn night 15 years before. They walked home. They were not a perfect family. They were not a normal family. They were not even, by most ordinary definitions, a family that lived together. But they were a family. They had survived. And that, in the end, was the only ending the story had ever needed.